feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please Lord give me a sign.
All right, we are live. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Craig. It is Fact of Madness with a brand new show. New year, new show. We're calling it Web of Facts with my friend Walter Heber. I'm saying that correct, right?
You got it.
All right. And he is with Promethean Link. We hooked up a couple of weeks ago and we've been going strong, and somehow we now have a show. So bring it, exciting as it is. We're going to let some people come in, give it a few minutes to let people come in. But how you doing today, man?
Brother, it's been a good morning. I've been busy.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, busy is good.
I love to stay busy. I'm always busy. I got up at 3:30 this morning. I get up at 3:30 almost every morning.
So I actually sent you a text, I think,
Mhm.
after I had done something, and I was thinking in my mind, because I always have I worked in a call center for quite a long time, so I always have
Right.
my phone on mute, but vibrate. So I was
Right.
like, man, if I send it to him, I wonder if he's gonna get up. So you were already up.
That's
So
good. I was up. I got it. Yeah.
Roger that. So we already have Let's in the building. He's one of my mods. So Let's, as you see people come in, help us out with links or anything like that if we have it. So, and he normally does a good job doing all that stuff. So I appreciate it.
Right on.
All right. So what do we got going on, man? We got the name of this show is I Know More Than You. You guys notice, if you haven't already, that it is AI know more than you. I was trying to do a little play on words. I don't know if it comes across quite as like I wanted it to, but you get the idea. We're talking about AI today. It's kind of in your wheelhouse, right?
Oh, yeah, every day. For the last 2 years, I jumped into the AI thing like with just reckless abandon. I use it every single day for just about everything you can imagine. And I find it's pretty powerful, and it's getting more powerful every day.
Absolutely, and that's kind of like what I wanted to talk about. Now, you and I have talked a little bit behind the scenes, and when we talked about doing the show, I kind of wanted to get to a point where we start off like basically the most basic that we possibly can to start. Now, I know you might have some people that you told about the show. They're going to come in. They know a lot more than me, and maybe a lot more than some of our audience. But I figure if we start there, we can always go deeper. So, on the simplest level that we can possibly go, what is AI and how is it that it is what we see today?
On the simplest. Okay. AI.
Or
I'm
or
gonna
the
try to,
or
yeah. No,
or
I'm gonna
the
have to start simple because really
right.
you'll lose 80% of the people. You start talking about tensors. But
Right.
we should bring up tensors. But basically what they've done is they have studied the way the brain works, studied the way neurons fire, study the way they're interconnected, and they create neural nets. Okay. And neural nets basically reinforce each other. And as a result, what you have is a digital representation of what happens, or at least a simplified version of what happens in the brain. They actually started all this by studying the eyeballs of frogs, which is very similar to the way the neurons work in the brain. So they patterned this stuff out in digital circuits, and then they created very complex, neural nets that essentially, when you feed them information, actually learn. So when you actually see something learning, or excuse me, when AI is trained, it actually is learning. It's not like it's some sort of putting it in a database and it's recalling it from the database. It is a very sophisticated, very complex situation that is not easy to explain without going into the mathematics and the circuitry of it. But for all intents and purposes, you can basically think that it is a parallel circuitry to the way the brain works.
Well, let me ask you this question, because we've had, I mean, I remember when I was living in Japan, I'm going to say around 84, 86. In fact, the guys that I was going to school with, they always had better stuff than my sister and I, because first of all, they were in Japan, that they lived in Japan, that's where they're from, but their parents were likely more wealthy than my mom. So I didn't even have a computer. right? All the computer stuff that I had to do was at school and in the lab. The reason why I bring this up is because I'm curious to know, what is the difference between the way that computers were made,
Mhm.
originally, and then how AI is? I mean, I know you're saying it's based on the brain, but really, what was the
Right.
difference? What was the big difference?
Okay, so I mean, it's kind of a complex question to answer, but essentially, what you have in the typical computer scenario is you have memory, right? So you
Mhm.
have little sectors that hold zeros and ones, and you have a processor that, so essentially, you have a register, it fills the register, that results in a cycle, and then it computes, it gives another answer, and then pulls other new memory or adds to other memory, and that generates what shows up on your screen. And the interplay between the different types of memory, such as a hard drive and RAM, generates what you end up interacting with. That's the old standard model. It's
Gotcha.
basically a library that you put books in and you go pull books from.
Mm,
That's the
okay.
old model. Okay, it's
Sure.
static. What you put in, you get out. In AI, what you have are banks of, for the simplest way to describe it, I would call them capacitors. It's memory, is all it is. It's memory. But the complex interplay of the way it arranges the zeros and ones no longer are a static library. They create
Gotcha.
what's known as an embedding. And an embedding is essentially a statistical map, if you want to call it that. It's still not a good term to describe it. See, the
Mhm.
thing is that there's not a lot of good terminology to make this complex stuff into simple parallels,
Right.
because what you end up having is a very sophisticated articulated web of concepts and words that have been trained over and over and over with new information and additional new information and feedback loops, and it actually learns. Okay,
Mm,
so when they say that it learns, it's not that it's programmed, it has actually gone through mistakes and feedback loops, just like you and I do when we touch a stove and say, "Ooh, don't do that again." But then you find out, well, it's not that hot, I got to touch it a little bit to see if it's on or not. Okay, it learns. So
mm,
it is actually doing in a digital form exactly what our systems do when we learn through mistakes.
gotcha.
Now, the input and output is different, but it is a representation or at least a parallel to what we go through.
And you mentioned the bank, kind of a
Mhm,
library bank, which was
mhm,
the computer model, and now we have the AI model, which is more analogous to our brain.
mhm,
Interestingly enough, how the circuits are going. So that's cool. So okay, so now we have an understanding of the system, if you will. Tell me how it is that the different AIs, ChatGPT, Gemini, Pi, how
right.
what are the differences between those individually and collectively?
Well, I mean, they're as different as Toyota from Nissan, from Cadillac, and so on and so forth. There's
Sure.
different methodologies in the way they're trained. There's different numbers of parameters. There's different amount of safety that's built into some of them. Some of them
Mhm.
are actually trained with supervision. Some of them are completely just throw it at the data and let it learn. Like the newest one that's hit the ground pretty hard, DeepSeek, is a what they call a zero model, which it has zero supervised training. And essentially, what happens in that case, it's just been thrown against rough life, and it just learns to navigate through feedback loop, feedback loop, feedback loop. Each time it makes a mistake, it gets corrected, and it teaches itself to learn.
Mm.
Whereas the assisted models kind of get the human jump start. And go ahead.
No,
You can
no.
tell.
Well, I did have something, but I think you were not quite finished with your thought. So go ahead.
Well, you can see that there's a little bit of a difference in terms of performance at the end of the long road when you have human assistance versus when it has to learn on its own.
Gotcha.
I,
Gotcha.
I would say that there seems to be an advantage in terms of its what's the term? It's the chain of thought reasoning. Now, I wrote that down because I always forget that phrase. The COT,
Chain chain
chain
of
of
thought
thought.
reasoning. Okay.
Yes.
Now, every
So.
now and then you'll see me write something down because I mean, the name of the show, at least my channel, is Fact of Madness. So I'm
Mhm.
one of those people that asks questions. So
Oh, I
if
love
it
it.
hits me in a certain way, I'm going to ask questions about it, which is why we are on here. Going back to how we started, you and I, we were in a
Hmm.
seminar together. You mentioned something, a service that you were able to provide. Some people bit. I was one of those people. We talked, we got here, and then you said, dude, I love AI. I'm like, me too. So we're here. So if I write something down, you know why,
Do
because
it.
I'm going to be looking it up.
Yeah,
Um,
you'll like that one.
now, now it feels like we have broadened the understanding of where we are. We're gonna probably obviously get a little bit deeper. I think as far as we are concerned, you and I are concerned, we've kind of described what it is, how it works.
Mhm.
Now, where do you think, or where are we now compared to where you think we're going to get to? If
Well,
if that's a reasonable question.
I think all of society, of life, everything has the crawl, walk, run aspect to it.
Mm,
I think we just started standing on our feet like a 2-year-old,
okay.
and we're starting to run, but we're bumping into things, both in terms of technology and in terms of society. There's a gigantic blind spot over the majority of the population right now. Because if you follow the AI circles, it is jumping quantum leaps every single day, and everybody's at work and they're doing their work to get paid, and they're going home and they're watching their sports and their news to wind down, and they're not paying attention to what's happening. And behind the scenes, AI is making Olympic sized jumps
Mm,
from month to month to month. 46 days ago, the Chinese released the open source DeepSeek model, which has performed um, better than the best that is publicly available from OpenAI right now. And in terms of cost of use, it is 27 times cheaper than what you pay for with OpenAI in terms of what you will pay to use it. Now, the results that I have experimented with and gotten have convinced me that it is equally as good, and it's different. Okay, it's kind of like you say, the difference between a Ford and a Toyota.
right.
You're going to find some differences. And I would say that as a coder, because I do like to use it primarily for coding, I haven't done anything with it in terms of content or generating, you know, written words other than the little bit that comes in and out of, coding. But as far as coding and building things with Python and PHP and JavaScript, it's incredible. It's floored me because if I use OpenAI's 4.0 and I don't use 4.01,
Hmm.
I will have errors, and I can take a one-shot approach, give it a solid prompt, and it'll give me a working piece of code that I can run in one attempt without any errors, without any problems. So I don't know if that's better in terms of in comparison to 4.01. But I will tell you that whenever I run out of tokens on 4.01, I'm going to drop back to DeepSeek and use it until my tokens are back. Or I shouldn't say tokens, but my number of they give me like a warning when I hit 25. At some point, I'm going to upgrade my account and pay for the whole $200 a month account because I use it that much. I think it's worth it. But currently, I'm really wondering whether it makes more sense to just drop into DeepSeek for code. Because here's the thing I did discover. Okay,
Hmm.
this was surprising. DeepSeek does have some very, how do I want to phrase this? Ideological differences.
Mm,
It wasn't something that I myself experimented with because it wasn't what I wanted to use it for. I went to use it for code. But I have a buddy of mine, his name is Dave, and he is a very intelligent coder and very intelligent. I mean, he's a very staunch patriot, very pro-American, and he started asking it questions about, um, um, well, political questions, and he
okay.
started asking it questions about, man, what I cannot think about it right now. What is
And you're talking about DeepSeek being the
yeah, the
Chinese,
Chinese? Yes,
right, right. Okay, so interesting. I mean,
yeah,
without even hearing what the question that he asked,
yeah.
I can already kind of on the surface imagine
Hmm.
that China being what and who they are, that there
Hmm.
might be some ideological kind of political differences
Yes.
on
I
the
have to
surface.
look it up because it's
Okay.
driving me nuts not being able to remember what it was that he searched for. I got to look at
Mm.
what is, my brain is drawing a blank right now about what is the country that
Thailand?
that Thailand.
or
Is it
Taiwan?
Taiwan?
Taiwan.
Taiwan.
Taiwan. Yeah.
Who owns Taiwan? He asked it that question, and
Oh,
according
okay.
to DeepSeek, it's a Chinese territory.
And that is
Right.
an ongoing.
Yes.
Okay.
Right. So it's already had come to a predetermined conclusion,
Mm,
and yeah.
so now that's fascinating. Okay.
Mhm.
So okay, so on the surface, and you talked about mistakes, if you will. So I have asked AI, and AI, I can't remember whether it was Gemini, whether it was Pi, whatever. We'll just call it AI.
Mhm.
I have asked a question, and the answer I received, I'm pretty certain I immediately knew it was wrong, and I asked to clarify it. You know what they say now or what it says
Mhm.
now, and I find it funny that I'm describing it as he or she or whatever. But I'm talking about AI.
Right.
What it said to me was still under development. Sometimes my information is not correct. It's a warning, right?
Mhm.
How do we get through that portion? You know what I mean?
Well, that's a very, very good question, and I don't know that my answer is going to be the best answer, but I have some ideas as to how I think about it. Okay,
Okay.
so I started using OpenAI's ChatGPT back in 2022, and I was at that period of time the marketing director for an industrial process equipment distributor. And immediately I started using it to generate my materials at work. And I would have to be very careful to accept its output without question. I
Mm,
had to go I mean, it was my job as the manager to check the work, right? Just like if it was an employee. And I found many things that it went incorrectly with. Now, it wasn't incorrect in terms of like absolutely insane incorrect. It was
mm,
reasonable and plausible. It just wasn't correct for my specific scenario. And being
gotcha.
the expert, the product expert of that product, I knew that it was patently wrong.
Right, right.
However,
Okay.
so I think there's always going to be a certain amount of you need to check its work. You cannot just blindly accept anything, and that's a real warning for the population for anything. Don't assume that any source of authority is always right. I think that's part of my Promethean mindset.
Yeah.
Know for yourself. You need to check its work. You need to be the expert. You don't need to let it have full control over anything. You need to be in charge of what you're using it for. Now,
Like let says the devil's in the details, right?
oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And one thing that I have noticed is that I have a friend of mine that says that OpenAI, no, it was Gemini. That Gemini is very woke. Okay,
Mm.
and I really believe that that's a result of what you train it on.
Okay.
And there are safety features that are built into it that will lean it in a certain bias, but there's certain, it's the training data set and what it's been trained on. It's just like a student. It's just like anybody. It's just like if you grow up in a different culture, you might find that, certain foods are absolutely okay. You might be okay with eating eels and uncooked
Mm.
fish. And other places you might say to yourself, that's absolutely disgusting. And somebody else says, man, dog is delicious. And
Yeah.
that's just a cultural difference. Okay. Um, your body doesn't know the difference. Your tongue might know the difference, but your body says, protein, vitamins, I'm going to take all that in. But culturally, we are brought up with different things. So if you're trained a certain way and the AI is trained a certain way, it's going to give you certain types of answers.
Well, let me ask you this. So I know you probably heard kind of the notion that history is the best teacher.
Mm,
Why
indeed.
not why not just throw all the historical lessons that have been learned
Right.
to AI and let it figure it out? I know we have to still kind of coddle it along, but even in that, because the reason why I'm asking this question is because
Yeah.
history probably tells China that Taiwan is not theirs.
Right.
And the rest of the world at least perceives it that way. So why the hell does China still
Uh-huh.
think otherwise?
Well, okay.
I mean, we
If
might be
let
getting
me,
into the weeds a little bit on that
no,
one, but
no,
go
we're
ahead.
not. We're not. You're bringing up a very important consideration. What about the history of America? How about if it was trained on the Native Americans' perspective on the Europeans coming to the New World? It's
Yeah,
going to give you a totally different answer, isn't it?
absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
it does matter. The problem is that history is written by the victors.
You know, I have heard people say that, and at the end of the day, that is true, right?
Yeah,
That is true. I mean,
it is.
I'm saying what you're saying is that the person who is writing it and the person who has to who makes it such is the people who won.
Right.
Whether that is the gospel or not remains to be seen. I'm
Well,
moving a lot because I'm excited about the conversation, so you might see my lights go all
nice.
crazy, but mhm,
No, but I really do think that there's a lot of things to be considered when you're using a training set for your knowledge base. And
mm,
biases and I would say prejudices and opinions seem to be more common today in everything than they were when I was a kid. So I was brought up with a very, I've even heard it referred to as a Rockefellerian educational system, right?
mhm,
And I kind of, being a kid in my household where being an intellect was encouraged and not fitting in was a natural thing because it was just our family. My mom was Puerto Rican. My dad grew up in Venezuela. He was American, but his father was in World War II and stationed all over the planet. And so that was one of the places they ended up. And so my upbringing involved a lot of classical music, which wasn't very typical,
mhm,
intellectual debates and conversations that would not be your typical, let's talk about football teams in the NFL.
right.
So I wasn't really raised in sports so much. I like to play baseball myself. I enjoyed it a lot, and I would play football, and I was a wrestler in high school. But my training set did not involve sports. Let's put it that.
Mm,
And and so as a result, the way I look at the world is probably very different than what I would appear to think about it if you just judge me on a superficial level.
right,
You might
right.
say this is a bald white guy who probably likes football and drinks beer and hangs out and has a good time. And that's partially true because over time I've had to adapt myself to fit into circumstances. But the root of who I am was trained on a very different set, so to speak. And I think what I'm really getting at is that there are biases that you get in through your training data, whether that's as a child or whether that's an LLM,
Yeah.
a large language model.
Now, you and I, we did this kind of by design because we've had a number of discussions behind scene before the show, and do have a timer just to let us know
I saw
where
that.
we are in the show. So
I
we're
appreciate
about
that.
no, I mean, and I think everything that you've said thus far is relevant to the question which we've asked, which is, you know, well, does AI know more than we? And by the way, we're also going to get into the future of human AI collaboration, which there is going to be some.
Hmm.
So in the second segment, I think either I or you've given me some kind of little tidbits of information which we're going to show. One of them being from Elon Musk, and I don't want to give it away, but I know that you probably think that the way that Elon Musk thinks about AI is probably the way that we should all kind of envision the approach that we're going to take. Otherwise, we're doomed on some level.
Hmm.
Is that
Hmm.
too
You've
what do
limited my options, but it's not a terrible set to go through. So let's walk down that road. I'm good with that.
Okay, well, before we do that, I want to do something which this is new to me, and I want to share it with you guys, which is kind of a segment break. So let me give it to so that we can go to the second part. Here we go. Okay,
And you
we're
know what I
gonna
liked about that?
what?
I like the asymmetric music.
Oh yeah, the syncopation, all that stuff. You said
Yes.
asymmetric, but that's what we're talking about, right? That's
Yeah.
yeah. I
Yeah.
mean I dig jazz on a lot of levels, and I also like the imagery, which was I mean we talked about kind of the foundations of it all, and now we're kind of reinforcing what we're talking about for or against. And I'm not saying I don't think either one of us have basically said that we are for or against AI. We're
Right.
just kind of recognizing that there's a way that we probably need to approach it. And I didn't mean to limit you. So fight yourself out of any box that I put you in.
No, no, you're good. You're good, man. And I can fight out of most boxes. So my
Roger that.
my thoughts are that it's a tool. It's a hammer.
Okay.
There's a lot of tools that are dangerous. A gun can feed your family. if you take it hunting, or can blow your arm off or your hand off or do something terrible, right?
Good. Yep.
So it's what you do with the tool. And in the hands of a skilled craftsman, a knife can turn into beautiful work. And in the hands of a carjacker, it can really do some stupid things to people. So I think AI is the same thing. The problem, and I wouldn't say the problem, I think the challenge for humanity with AI is to behave responsibly. And
Mm.
I think that responsibility is a thing that has fallen out of, it's no longer fashionable. We
Wait,
as a,
wait.
as,
So
yeah, go ahead.
responsibility of the
Of everything.
receiver of the information from AI or
Sure.
AI's?
Both.
Okay. So
Everybody.
with balance, basically, is what you're saying
With balance. I mean, I
in
always go
totality.
back to the best efficiency point. And I
Mm.
believe that you have to manage the difference between rights and responsibilities. And overall, we don't, I don't want to say a negative thing about our modern society because there's a lot of really good things, and AI being one of them.
Sure.
But I do think that we have discarded wisdom as something of the past. And by wisdom, I saw it. I answered somebody the other day when they asked, "What is wisdom?" And they said, "What is being smart, being intelligent, and being wise?" And I said, "Being smart is knowing the differences between fruits and vegetables. Being
Mm.
intelligent is knowing that a tomato is a fruit, and being wise is knowing not to put a tomato into fruit salad." Okay, because you have to know how to apply it. And when I was in education courses, they had a thing called Bloom's taxonomy. And Bloom's taxonomy starts off from the lowest level where you have knowledge, and then you go to comprehension and analysis, and then synthesis and evaluation. And there are all these little steps. And it's like a hierarchy, just like a hand of cards. You know, you got a pair, and then you got three of a kind, you got two pair, so on and so forth, all the way up. And I think wisdom is a long term, big view of things. If you see wisdom in general, has a long view of things. It delays gratification now because you're going to end up with something bigger and better later.
And
And
it's also informed with those things that you're talking about, the information from school, but it's
right,
informed with just life in general, right? And
right,
then from those things collectively, like you're
correct,
saying, you take all those pieces together and you get a long-term result, which
correct,
we call wisdom, which and
right.
that makes sense. That makes sense for
I,
sure.
I
Absolutely.
do. I think that it is that, and long term strategies. I like Jordan Peters' use of that phrase because that's where I got it from. But I think I've felt it in my gut most of my life. Is that you do have to delay gratification, that you do kind of turn your head away from instant gratification. And here's where the design flaw. You know, we talk about the algorithm, feed the algorithm, and the algorithm feeds us garbage and it puts us in our bubbles and all that.
Mhm.
Okay. What the main algorithm that has happened for the last 125 years in America and in the world at large is convenience. If I want to sell you something, I need to make it convenient. If it's not easy for you, you're not going to look at it. If it's
True.
complicated and it takes more than 2 seconds worth of thought, you're going to say, well, give me the one that I don't have to think about. We all want a shortcut. We all want to embrace instant gratification. Is that always wrong? No, it's not always wrong. But is it mostly wrong? Probably. If
Well,
you
you
look at it
being
as a bell curve,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna
Oh,
say, you being a sales and marketing person, you know that the thing that you're gonna give to a person you're trying to sell something to is the offer with benefits, right?
correct.
Because
Yeah.
if it's not benefiting them, you could give them the best offer. Somebody's explained to me how there was a Ferrari at a car place, and a lady
Mhm.
comes in, and it's like dirt cheap, but she refuses it because why? She
Yeah.
needs a van for her kids.
Right.
It's
Right.
there's no benefit to her.
No, no, that's funny. That's a good one. I like that. And I do think that as a society as a whole, we short circuit things. We mentioned the word heuristic in our last session together.
Yep.
And the heuristic is a shortcut. It's kind of like the superficial signal that you look for that tells you that this is okay or not okay. And one of the things that I think is interesting about one thing that didn't appear to me as it wasn't obvious when I was a young person was that confidence is more important in our modern society than competence. Okay. And they should go hand in hand, because that's where the heuristic comes from. If you're good at something, then you're not usually shy or afraid to talk about how good you are, because you can back it up.
Right.
But what has happened is over 100 years, 125 years, people have recognized that confidence can get you in the door better than competence. You might be really good at something and not actually display the signals of it, because you're so good at it, you realize how much you don't know. And so you have the imposter syndrome, because you're aware of everything you don't know. But somebody who just started might say, you know what? I could do that. Look, he's just swinging a metal stick and he hits a ball and it goes into the hole. That's $1 million like that. I could do that. Oh, so easy. All I did was swing a stick and hit a ball. I'm going to do that. And then you try it and you realize, wow, that's a lot harder. And that it took a lot of attempts to kind of fine tune his physiology and his mindset to focus in such a way to do that. When you're good at something, it looks easy. When
Well,
you're not good at something, it's very difficult to do.
you made me think of the pause that I think we should all take when it comes to AI on some level,
Mm,
because at the end of the day, you can feel confident that this entity, this
mm,
thing is going
mhm.
to have all of the answers, because you know that it's skimming all the data, all the information. So of course, when you take all of those things together, then the answer is going to be correct. But we have to remember that there is somebody programming or putting that information to it, or leading it to the well, so to
Right.
speak. Which
Mhm.
also kind of leads me to another question. Will there ever be a time where AI doesn't need to have humans input the information or lead it to the
Yes,
well?
it's already there. It's already there. If you look at what they did with DeepSeek, it is a self-trained model. That's what I meant by zero
Okay.
assistance. Okay,
Okay.
it trained itself through trial and error, whereas the OpenAI model required additional training from humans, and so did Gemini, and so did a lot of the models. There's some differences there. It's an open source model, which means that you'll be able to look underneath the hood and modify it. I think I would encourage anybody that's in this game that wants to really understand it to get a local copy. That's the other thing. You can download the thing. If you've got the hardware to run it, you can actually install it on your own computer.
Of
And
DeepSeek, or
yes,
just okay, all right.
yes, it's huge. I mean, you're going to need a lot of processor. You're going to need a lot of GPU. You're going to need a lot of RAM. You're going to need a lot of VRAM. You're going to need a lot of everything. But it is doable, and it's not super expensive to do. Like, I would imagine that every large corporation is going to have one. And
So
mhm,
I think, because we're going to get into the kind of evidence of it all, so to speak, I think it's a good time to actually hear what Elon said about it,
oh
because
yeah,
you're kind of touching on it. So
right.
this is you sent this to me
It was from X.
from X, right? Okay. And I think he says some kind of interesting things. So let me just throw this up there. Let me get it up
Mhm.
real quick. And some people may hear um something in the background. You live next to a radio station,
I
right? So
do.
sometimes
I'm
things
sorry.
cross
Let me
over.
turn that off for a minute while you do this.
Okay, all right. Let's see.
Can you hear me?
I do worry about AI actually, um, because we are creating an intelligence that ultimately will be far more intelligent than any human, and ultimately more intelligent than the sum of all humans. So, in creating AI, we need to be very careful and like kind of. It's like having a sort of a genius child. You want to have that child grow up with good values. Um, I think the most important thing in training AI is that it's rigorously truthful.
Mm.
This is very, very important, essential. And my concern about a lot of the AIs that are being developed are that they're trained to lie, and some cases with potentially disastrous consequences. I mean, when Google Gemini came out, people asked, like, which is worse, misgendering Caitlyn Jenner or global thermonuclear war? And it said misgendering Caitlyn Jenner. I'm like, that's a problem, guys, because if this AI becomes super powerful, it could decide that the best way to avoid misgendering is to kill all humans, which makes the probability of misgendering zero. So it's very important to have AI be maximally truthful and curious, and love humanity. Very important.
Now, let's put
Yeah.
this back up. Now, some wise things that he says, right? I mean, that's clearly wisdom, and to
Right.
boot, we have it coming from a very intelligent person. So,
Yeah.
what are you? I'll share what I think after you go, or you want me to go first. But
Go ahead.
so first of all, I think at the end of the day, when you get to the crux of it all, truth, the Bible says the truth will set you free, right?
Amen.
So when you have something going on in there that's untruthful,
Hmm.
I mean, you just have a house of cards, so to speak. So I think he's hit it on the nail that if we rely on information that isn't truth from the very beginning, then the end result is going to be very bad. And his extreme example was AI could decide that we don't even need to be here,
Right. Yeah.
which is kind of scary. But
R-
interesting enough, you have it getting information or giving out information, which is in this
Yeah.
case, so it clearly to me it's clearly faulty.
Yeah. So in lawyer speak, I think they call that fruit from a poisonous tree.
Yes, that is what they call it. Good catch. Good catch.
And so the problem is a very complex thing, which is the semantics of language, because there are things that we accept that we have been trained on, and they are like social contracts that we don't even realize we buy into. Okay.
Hmm.
I'll give you some examples. There's a really good article called Why Chimpanzees Don't Hold Elections. And it's a great article. You have to read it and think through every single sentence and paragraph in that article, because it confronts everything you think you know and explains how we form ideas and why we collectively agree on things that make no sense.
Man,
And
you come up with some of the greatest articles, and I've only listened to two or watched or read two of them, but I'm definitely gonna read this one. But I think
this
it's
one's worth it.
fascinating.
This
Okay.
one's a mind blower. This one will really challenge you in ways that, if you are honest with yourself, you cannot deny. Okay.
Mhm.
Let me give you some examples. The thing that's really fascinating to me are territories, boundaries, rules, the arbitrariness of them. Okay.
Mhm.
Speeding, you speed down the road and you go into a zone that's marked by a sign that says, from 45 to 60 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And or you go from 60 to 45, and all of a sudden you get pulled over and you have a $250 fine because you were going 10 miles over, because you weren't paying attention and you were jamming out to Led Zeppelin.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's an arbitrary rule that we have all agreed to that we're going to pay this fine because we were moving fast. Okay. There's a lot of things that animals who don't speak English or listen to words and don't process, language like we do, they don't care about it. They're going to show up where they're going to show up. They don't know what boundaries are. They don't know what territories are. They don't know when they go across from the Florida line to Georgia, or from Georgia to South Carolina. They're not aware of that stuff. Okay. Anything that an animal doesn't know is something that we have agreed to.
Hmm.
And when you read that article about why chimpanzees don't hold elections, what it really clearly explains is that we live in a consensus based reality. Our society has a lot of ideas that are codified with words. We call them laws, we call
Yeah.
them rules, we call them conventions, morals, all kinds of ethics. And that stuff only belongs in the minds of humans. But
Mm.
now that belongs in the minds of AI.
Wow, that's man.
Okay.
So so who's the animal?
Well, we all are. I mean, we are biological animals.
Yeah.
The thing is that we have a neocortex that sits on top of the rest of the cerebellum, and it basically helps us to understand that we're part of a tribe. And
Mm.
we develop benevolence and altruism and all kinds of other things that help us behave with each other, so that we don't become animals and destroy each other like other animals would. You notice that it's the mammals that have the tribes, the dogs that go in packs, and gorillas that go in tribes, and mostly, I mean, I would say that you could make an argument that fish do the same thing, and I'm sure that's a proto I'm sure their brains work somewhat with a proto-neocortex. I don't know enough about fish biology to tell you one way or another. But the thing about it is that we use words to communicate human values. And as a result, whatever we train our models with, and those are going to be human words, they're going to pick up those values as well. Now, if there's ever been an injunction for society to clean up its act, it's that we're about to empower things with our words. And if we trained it on just the behavior found in social media, we would be raising absolute horrible AIs that would absolutely want to reach out and destroy us. Because
Wait.
let's face it, we put garbage on social media. You will put an
That's
opinion
true.
out there, and somebody will jump on there and wish you to die because they don't agree with you.
That is true. And you said, and I want to clarify that I understood what you said because it made me think about something. You said that we use words to demonstrate our values, or what did you say
Well, to codify. I said
to codify?
codify. You know,
So,
I mean,
and the reason why I
yeah,
asked
go ahead.
the reason why I asked that question is because sometimes we actually use action to well, I said demonstrate, but you said codify. Like for
Mhm,
example, if you see somebody an entity, a person or an
mhm.
animal suffering,
Right,
you don't talk about what is going to make that animal or person be better. You go and
right,
make it better, right? Now,
right.
AI can't do that. It can describe what is
Mhm.
compassionate and what's
Sure.
value. You know what I mean? So
Right.
that, and I think ultimately, when it comes down to what I'm thinking about, is that we will get to the point, and he says AI will become smarter than us collectively, right?
Yeah.
Eventually,
Yeah.
but there's still going to be some difference between AI and us.
Mm, I'm going to
And it,
challenge you on that.
okay,
I'm
all
going to
right,
challenge you on that. Okay.
okay.
And here's why.
Mhm.
So, where you and I have interacted with AI up to this point has been mostly with words, large
Sure.
language models. Okay. There are models that are being trained on other in and out, what I call IO, input, output, right?
Okay.
And when you train an AI, the same circuitry, like the nervous system, can be trained on other types of inputs, just like images. You've got some AI now that can generate beautiful images that will just that's irritating the living shit out of the arts community
Yeah.
because it's coming up with art that is equally as you could spend 25 years to perfect your craft, and now some kid out of high school can sit down, type a prompt, and generate this incredible piece of artwork and sell it for as much as you did for the stuff that you worked on for 25 years to figure out how to do.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And as a result, we have different types of AI. It's still using the same tensor logic, it's still using the same neural nets to program itself, but the inputs and the outputs are different. So it's no different. You could create a sympathetic nervous system that is trained on something, some input output. It could be trained on just facial recognition. It could be trained on the interactions between your facial expressions and your sound and what you hear, the intensity and the word choice. The LLMs can do it. I have a friend of mine who is developing a lot of AI, and his AI is able to do some things I'm going to keep confidential until he reveals them because they're world changing, and he's going to be probably the next richest person on the scene because he's developed something that nobody's done yet, and it's absolutely amazing. But I mean,
Do you remember the line? What's in the box?
right,
You know what
yeah.
that's from? From Seven. That's when you said that. I'm gonna keep it.
Oh
I
my
was like, oh my
God,
gosh,
from
what's in
Seven,
the
I
box?
hated that movie.
What's in the
That movie
box?
scared. That's the only scary movie I hated.
It's
All the
one of my
rest of them,
favorites.
yeah, it's a psychological scary movie, man. When you start thinking about what humans can do to each other, that's where I get scared. I don't get scared of monsters, and it's people on people that worry me more than anything. And that's where I'm even more worried about the people that are in charge and people with the use of AI, rather than the AI itself. I don't fear AI because I think that if we are training it to be ultimately, what's the right word? If we train it to be as intelligent as possible, I don't think that it's going to turn around and decide that we're a bad thing. Okay. However, if you give it the ability to do just about anything that you can train it to do, and then you put it behind the hands of somebody that's not a good intentioned, benevolent person, that's what I'm more worried about.
Well, I think it. I think at the when we from start to finish, when we think about it all, there is going to have to be some wisdom involved in allowing AI to get to its furthest extreme, right?
Yeah.
Because I mean, even in the kind-heartedness and wisdom that you have and knowledge that you have talking
Right.
about it, I still see that there's some inherent danger, but that's maybe just because I've lived long enough to see things that are bad. But it doesn't have to be bad, like you're saying, and I know that you look at it as a tool, and I
Right.
think I look at it as a tool too, and
Well,
I actually feel like I'm embracing AI daily, more and more.
right.
But I have instances, for example, and we just finished, the last minute, so we will be going into another section, but
Okay.
I have actually been, quote, unquote, "scolded" by AI
Hmm.
because I was asking a question
Oh, I remember this.
that it warned me previously that I couldn't or shouldn't do.
Right.
So I'm being scolded and suspended by some guidelines that I can't even discuss
Right.
behind closed doors.
Sure.
On some level, I have some issue with that on some level.
Sure. Sure.
But
Well, two things I want to say about that, and then we can jump into the next section. So,
sure.
one, to your point, okay, you were talking with a trained AI that was trained with safety security measures.
Mhm.
If you had said the same question to it back in 2022, it would have let you have that conversation.
Okay.
Since then till now, they have put in a lot of guardrails to keep certain things from happening because they don't want the liability. Okay, the DeepSeek probably doesn't have that safety guard in place. I don't.
Mhm.
It'll have its own pro China safety guards in place, but it won't have what you were worried about there to try to figure out. So there are some open source models that will let you have that'll tell you how to cook meth if that's what you want to do. You know,
Alright. Gotcha.
there's some out there that will do that, but they're trying to make it consumer safe. And consumer safety means that you can't get the thing with the blades exposed. You got to put the little guard around it to keep you from getting hurt. Now, the other thing I wanted to say was to your previous point, in a very old book by an author named Albert Pike called Morals and Dogma. I found this when my great grandfather passed away in his books. And I remember just because I was curious, it was such a cool looking book, had like a double headed eagle on the front of it, and it was embossed in gold. And I opened up the book and I went to the first chapter or somewhere in the first chapter, and it talked about fire. Okay. And
Mm.
that it gave this example that fire is like knowledge, that you can use fire to cook with it or burn down the forest.
Sure.
Okay. And that's where part of my Promethean link, God of fire
Mm.
mindset about AI is
Yeah.
that AI is like fire. Okay. You need to contain it in order to use it for something. If you put it inside of a combustion engine, you can use it to move a car and you can create an entire economy of moving goods and services across the entire planet. But if you put it into homes and you don't have a watering system or some sort of way to put it out, you're going to burn down all of LA. So, fire is good if you use it properly. Fire is bad if you let it completely unrestrained and don't put any controls and guards in it. That's the job of a good society, is to understand where to put the guardrails in. Now, I will say that society is structured, and there are some people that should never have the ability to go around and play with fire. And then there are
Mhm.
some people that will experiment with it and they will make the most incredible things in the world. I mean, if you think about what nuclear energy is, it's not really fire. It's an entirely different type of thing, but you
That's
could
a bit different
qualify it.
beast for sure, yeah.
Okay. But if you put it in a nuclear reactor, you could actually power an entire country for, 50 years without any waste product other than like spent uranium that you can properly take care of. It's all about what you do with it. It's not what you have, it's what you do with it. The question is, how wise are the people that have the control over this stuff? Wisdom is what we should be electing for. Wisdom is like I say, it's passe. Nobody cares about the wise anymore. Everybody has left wisdom back in like that doesn't belong to us. We
Mhm.
want we want goals, we want KPIs, we want profits, we want economy, we want all kinds of stuff that we invented that are inventions of the mind, and we have forgotten that we have seasons and that we have natural things that we're part of the earth. And I'm an engineer as much as anybody, and I love to play with AI and digital technology, but my root is I'm a biologist, and I was trained to understand ecosystems as systems, and that's where I kind of apply everything. And to me, I feel like what's missing in the entire dialogue of all of this is AI and biology. Now they're doing some really great things with AI on farms. Instead of putting pesticides in the ground, they have little tiny robots with lasers going around zapping all the bugs. That's a great idea. It keeps us from having to put all kinds of glycophosphate into the water supply and give ourselves cancer and who knows what. So I think there's some really smart uses of AI in that.
Oh,
And I think there's,
okay,
you know,
okay, Professor. I know that you're a teacher. All right, so let me say
yeah,
this, and we will move on to the next section. First of
absolutely,
all,
sure.
for those of you guys who stopped by, we appreciate you being here. The comments that you've made, thank you very much. If you haven't already done so, if you're not subscribed, please consider subscribing, like, and share to somebody who you think might enjoy this content. We will be moving on to our next session. We're basically wrap it up. And just give me a second, and I'll let you know how we move into that part right there. So give me this. All right. Wrapping it up. Now, when I say wrap it up, I don't know how long it'll take us to do that. But so we started off with kind of getting an understanding of AI in general. And I think you done a well job of kind of discussing it for me. I think I'm clearer than I was before on the logistics of it all, the usage of it all, the dangers, the inherent dangers. Not necessarily in the technology in and of itself, but how we go about using that tool, right? Um, and and the warnings. So when it comes down to it, I know more than you. I think we may agree that there's no getting away from the fact that AI will become smarter than us, right?
Yeah, it
Uh,
is.
and so, what really, at the end of the day, is the future of our collaboration with AI?
All right. I have some theories on that. And one of the areas where I hope we see it is people that have mental issues like Alzheimer's
You
and perhaps
do not make me cry, sir. Come on
no,
now.
no, not on camera because I will too. Okay, my mom has Alzheimer's,
Mine
and
too.
I would give up. You don't know how much just for 5 minutes to have a conversation right now, just to tell her what's happened since the last time I was able to talk to her,
I got you.
and I would love to see either AI figure out a treatment for Alzheimer's that reverses it, or stops it, or prevents it. But there could be another interface, another possible human, what they call HMI, human machine interface, where let's say you put a probe in somebody's brain, and the part of the brain that still functions and still is able to make communication, because that seems to be what stops functioning, is the communication part in the
Mhm.
brain for the Alzheimer's person. I don't know if they're processing information or not. You really can't tell, but they sure can't tell you. And I do know that when I play certain music for my mom when I go to see her, that she will sing the lyrics. And so there's a certain part of her brain that will be able to communicate, and she will and she will actually communicate now with song. So if she can sing what she wants to say to you, she can sing a conversation. She just
So wait,
can't.
if there's a there has to be a melody or a song that she already
She
knows?
makes a melody.
Oh, okay. So is she now you said you grew up with music on some level. Your mom is a musician as well?
So her brother was a famous, and still is a famous Puerto Rican musician in El
Okay.
Trio Borinquen, and he is one of the musicians there. His name is Papo Valle, and my aunt Alba Rosa is his wife, and they were both very famous musicians in Puerto Rico. And they did the old ballads that were very popular in the 50s and 60s and 70s, and become traditional Puerto Rican Christmas music and that kind of stuff. And so all those songs I grew up with, and when he comes to visit her and he sings, she'll join in on the song. Or if I
Mm,
bring my phone and start playing some of his songs off of YouTube, she'll start singing with the songs. And then once she starts singing, she may have a couple of good couple sentences.
yeah.
She'll be able to kind of be in the moment. So there's something in there. It's not like she's gone and absolutely not reachable. Okay. But it's for very, very small pieces of time.
Yeah.
So to me, I'm thinking, okay, you come up with it, you find out where in the brain the signal is at. Okay. You say, okay, it's not getting connection over here. We're going to put a probe in there and we're going to train an AI to communicate on those levels where it actually starts taking it in and out, because we think in electrical signals. Okay, our brains actually do the same thing that circuitry does.
Yeah,
It's
for sure.
potentials. It uses calcium, it uses sodium phosphate, potassium, and it uses that. But that could easily turn into a communication interface for people with Alzheimer's. And could you imagine if all of a sudden we have an AI that my mom is connected to, and all of a sudden she's able to say, "Mira, hijo, hace mucho año que yo no te puedo hablar," and all of a sudden she starts talking to me. I would just be,
Yeah.
it would be amazing. And why?
That'd be
That's
cool.
not impossible anymore. That is absolutely a very real possibility in this century.
Sure. And you spoke of something which is very dear to me. Obviously, hearing my mother's singing voice,
Hmm.
gospel music. She loves gospel
Hmm.
music.
Right.
And I remember also my grandmother used to sing all the time. And true enough, what you talk about is not even far-fetched at all.
Mm-mm.
My mother can sing, and it seems like none of this Alzheimer's is affecting her at
Right.
all. And
Exactly.
there is moments of lucidity.
Hmm.
We call it what do we call it? Where she resets, but she
Right.
does it far less often when she's
Right.
doing something that she really enjoys and
Right.
unmolested. When I say unmolested, because sometimes um, certain things bother my mom, and it kind of infringes.
Aggravates it.
Yeah, or it will set her off, talking
Mm.
about different things, finance, related. My mother was scammed for a period of time, and,
Mm.
until I became aware of it and kinda squashed that, that is in the she's stuck in a space in her head where she
Mm.
can't get past that despite me telling her all the time,
Right.
"You asked me to take care of it, I'm taking care of it." But that
Right.
is fascinating to think about, um kind of intercepting the forgetful part of it, but extending the memory part of it.
Right.
And who knows how we could go about doing that, but they are, like you said, it's not like it's impossible.
No, no, it isn't impossible. And I believe that there are already, I think there is a person that has had an implant put into the brain to interface with, I don't know if it's an AI or a computer system, but I do know that they have already done that. So it's not on the distant horizon. It's already here. The question is at what level and how common can it be made? I mean, is that something that is the insurance going to cover that?
Yeah.
Probably not. That would have to be something that would be an elective surgery or elective situation. And the problem with Alzheimer's is that when you're so close to the end of life, people don't feel like putting the time and effort and energy into doing something that would bring you the most amount of, I mean, if I could just have 5 minutes with her,
Yeah.
it would be just invaluable. There's no money you could put around that. And,
Let me make a
unfortunately,
weird
yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Let me just make a weird kind of, question, if you will,
Sure.
because you said voluntary,
Hmm.
and we are talking about set of circumstances, a disease that at the end of one's life causes you to forget things.
Right.
Why wouldn't we suggest or be amenable to, for example, having that installed like near birth? I mean,
Wow.
that's why I said it's weird. I mean, it's
Whoa.
like, whoa.
Well, I didn't see that one coming. You caught me off left guard right there, bro. That was
No,
awesome. Okay. I mean, it's
but
not an
voluntary
impossibility.
voluntary is a
God.
key word in my mind. It's like
Yeah.
this MFer is crazy.
Well, I mean, on a theoretical level, it's not a terrible idea. My gut
Mm.
instinct was, holy crap, I don't want to put anything like that in a baby.
I
But
agree. Right.
however, I mean, you got a point. That's not necessarily a terrible idea if you're just looking at the realm of possibilities. Okay.
Yeah.
And
But
and
I
and
I at the same time, I the wisdom of it all, which is
Mhm.
what's coming into the conversation is
Right.
there's something about it that says no. I mean, just like, like
Yeah.
so many of the other things that we could do to us, to people,
Hmm.
we
Right.
don't do for reasons. But and at the end of the day, I'm saying,
Yeah.
why not? But I still feel
Well,
probably not.
and I understand that too. And I think that there's probably going to be in the near, I don't know if it's near, but let's say in 25 years, that might be a reality that is common. Just like, putting the sodium or the silver nitrate in the baby's eyes to keep the infections down.
Because
Okay.
we
That
figured
might
that
become
out. Yeah.
right
Yeah.
because we figured that out. And all of a sudden you're like, you know what? I've got Aetna, and Aetna will cover the brain implant at the age of 4. And all of a sudden
Mhm.
you go in with your vaccination shots and get your implant. Now, part of me says that sounds horrible, and it sounds like a not good future for mankind. But it's like a tool. It's what you do with it.
Yeah.
If it's a let's say you're for the sake of arguments, you're Bill Gates and you can afford that, and you have children or you have grandchildren, and you know that, hey, you developed the technology and you know it's going to be. The only thing that I think about that is it might be something that you would do, but there's always unintended consequences that
Yeah.
until you do it, you don't know what's going to happen. And it might work out great 1,000 times, and that one out of 1,000 does something absolutely just horrific. So
Yeah.
you never know. You never know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and we did. I mean, I'm not saying, I'm not promoting brain implants at birth, near birth. My point was,
Right.
I mean, like we all walk around with a phone, for example. I mean,
Sure.
how much information different than what it started
Mm,
that off with, and the tracking and the all the other unintentional consequences that we
yeah.
experience with our phones that we
Right.
do have, but we accept them. So I'm not saying that we'll get there, but at
Right.
the point of it all was we were trying to say, if we have a point in our life where we're losing memory,
Right.
then why not find a way to keep and capture all those many, and maybe stretch the moments where your memory is sound in the moment. So, but
Well,
that's you and I thinking about things that we want for our mom.
I'll leave you this last thought. Okay.
Okay.
What if what you find out when you are on your deathbed and you wake up on the other side is that you actually did have an implant, and this was just a ride at the fair? And this whole entire lifetime was a story that you picked out from a long line of DVDs, and you said, I want to have that lifetime because it was a really good one, or I really love that character, or whatever it is that you
Yeah.
thought. And it turns out that all of this was the Matrix. Because, I mean, the reality is, how do I say this delicately? Consciousness is the final frontier, and we're
Hmm.
probing that final frontier with AI. And there, at some point, theoretical levels, we might find out that AI is just the transition that we are using to explain to ourselves, so that when we finally reach that point, it's not the psychological shock that we expected. Because let
True.
me tell you, my lifetime from going into like being born in 1973 and seeing the 80s and then the 90s and then the 2000s and then to now, um, I can't believe I was fortunate enough to be born in a transition period with one foot in the analog world and another
Hmm.
in the digital world, and a
Yeah.
third foot, which I didn't know I had, in the AI world.
Yeah.
So to me, I've lived in the most transitional change in all of, as far as I'm concerned, recorded history. And so this is such an odd lifetime to have,
Mm.
that I consider myself incredibly lucky. So lucky that this might actually be a ride at a carnival. And when I pass away, find out that, man, I love that ride. I can't wait to do it again.
Well, you and I share something. We have something in common, that we both are, on some level, scientists. I worked in the clinical laboratory as in the Air Force, and for years after. And I told you this as well, and you kind
Mhm,
of touched point on it. That I worked in microbiology under the microscope at times, and I saw
mhm.
a very tiny world with me looking down into it, and so many things that you cannot see. So my
Right.
perspective of something like that is informed in that manner, that I can recognize that beyond that little uh slide with a cover slip on top and
Mhm.
a little piece of liquid that has millions of stuff running around in
Right.
a completely entire world
Right.
where I can affect it. I can heat it up and diminish the amount of room that it has and do so
Mhm.
many things to that world. It's not so far fetched for me to
Mm-mm.
understand that beyond this moment that we have here,
Yeah.
and even on the other side, that there's something that could be not quite the way it seems, because it's just different.
So there's a couple names I'll throw out just for research and fun.
Okay.
There's Buckminster Fullerene. Well, that's the name of the shape he invented, Buckminster.
I've heard of that.
Yes,
The
he
buckyball?
had the buckyball,
Mhm.
and Buckminster's theory about life in general. And then there's another guy that is kind of some very weird reading, but very intelligent and very sophisticated. Rudolf Steiner, I think is how you pronounce it.
Okay.
And he's an old writer. You'll find that he was very prolific and had some very unusual theories and kind of borders on the spiritual. Um, Both of those guys will have a lot of insight into the nature of consciousness. Now, they use different terminology, but Rudolf Steiner's work would be more of the using the word choices from the spiritual side,
Okay.
you know, whereas Buckminster would be more of the scientific.
Scientific. Okay.
But they say a lot of the same things, just say it differently. If you look for the parallels, and then if you really want to get bizarre land, go into some of the occult alchemical writings, like of Dave Mathers and the Kabbalist. And then you'll start seeing that a lot of this stuff is repeated over and over and over. And there's nothing new under the sun. There's even a word in the Jewish mindset, the frame. And I'm not saying I'm either pro or against Israel. That's not a political point. It's just
Yeah.
knowledge from the library. But the golem is the AI. If you look into what their terminology means in the Kabbalist mindset.
Okay.
And it basically is a manufactured consciousness. So this has been talked about 4,000 years before it ever showed up. This isn't new. This is just a manifestation that's been there for years. It's just finally taken its that's why I say the earth right now is ready to go into puberty. This is puberty earth. Is what we're seeing. That's why it's so turbulent. And Elon Musk is a pituitary gland. That's why he wants to go conquer another planet. Now, I know that's really crazy shit. But but look at it. If you start looking at what the pituitary gland does to the body and what Elon Musk has done to the planet Earth in terms of putting satellites in space, creating electric cars, building AI, I mean, all of these things are the role that the pituitary gland plays. Okay.
Now, I
So,
think that something that might be interesting because you've used this analogy, and the first time you threw it at me, I was like, "What the hell is he talking about?" That's me having studied, blood cells going through a body. But then I started thinking about it. It doesn't sound too terrible. So I'm going to suggest that we put together a show that kind of looks at the body the way it is and
mm,
relate it to exactly what you're talking about
oh,
because I think
yeah.
that's kind of fascinating.
Well, I
And
did. Yeah.
go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I did that using AI. I asked it to make, I basically gave it like 12 or 15 different, like, this is this system, this is that system, this is the other.
Mm,
And it was like, heck yeah, it is. Let me show you more. And it just went down the road and expanded into this like full body to earth, trans parallel, whatever you want to call it. But I mean, and again, this isn't a new idea. If you look up the concept of the homunculus, okay, the alchemical homunculus, which is kind of a disgusting, gross concept when you read about what it is, in terms of how you manufactured one. I will tell you that the ancient alchemists like to boil pee and other bodily fluids and do really
mm,
weird stuff, which eventually turned into chemistry. So I'm not going to completely discount their craziness.
yeah.
But the concept of the homunculus was a little man that was an analogy to the big man, right?
Okay.
And it's like we talked about in a previous episode where you have the Mandelbrot set, which is the tiny little equation equals the big thing.
Mhm.
And so what you end up with is a tessellation or a fractal of the same thing repeated again in a different size, in a different size, in a different size. Like you see blood veins, roots, rivers, lightning, they all take the same shape because they're looking for the path of least resistance. So there's a rule there that results in all these patterns. And all I'm saying is that there's a rule there that results in all these patterns. That's all I'm saying.
I got you. Well, so now, and like I've said before, you and I have talked about some of the things that we would be talking about going forward, how
Right.
we approach the show, and as a new show starting off this year with the limited time that you and I both have, I think that I'm excited to think that we could have other shows like this. I don't know if I'm sure. I hope it was fun for you, but it certainly was
Oh,
fun for me.
heck yeah.
I think all we need to do really is to let people know out there that the show exists, what we kind of talk about. We did it with drones and what was going on with that. I'm sure we'll be able to cover some other things. And AI is definitely on your list because you seem to know a lot about it. And just in talking to you, I kind of have a new, informed, wiser perspective of it. So I appreciate that. So I'm gonna basically thank the people who came through to the show. Those of you who will listen to it on the replay, like I asked, if you can like, share, and consider subscribing, we would appreciate it. I don't have anything else. I thank you for my guest who's come, who I'm going to consider a co-host. We
I
appreciate your
like it.
time. Anything else you want to say before we go?
I don't know. I like to give shout outs. I've always been the kind of person that likes to thank people that I didn't give a shout out to my mom or dad last time. I kind of started to talk about my mom and went down the Alzheimer's road. So I would like to shout out to my mom and dad who will not be on the internet, but I just want them to know in the spirit world that, I'm shouting out to you because I appreciate you.
Amen.
A shout out to my brother, David Heber, who is an amazing person with a brain that you would not just be able to. It's incredible the stuff he can come up with. And then let's see who else is a good one to throw out there. My wife and my kids, they're awesome. Melanie and Hannah and Olivia. And I don't know. I
Nice.
think we'll leave it there right there.
Roger that. And I'm going to look bad because I didn't shout out any of those people. I have in the past, but my heart is with all of the same type of people that you just
Sure.
damn did. So we're going to close at that. And like I said before, you guys,
Uh-oh. I just lost the sound.
right side or left side, it doesn't matter. All I ask that you meet me somewhere here in the middle, because if we insist on staying on the opposite ends of any idea, politically, religiously, etc., we will never find a place that we can agree. So everybody, with that, we'll say peace and take care. Love you all. Thank you.
Thanks, brother.
Hold on.
Yep. Bro, that was amazing.
One second. You'll see the red come.
Confucius, don't confuse us, let me explain. The object of this game, let's all play the same. Don't question the madness, embrace the change. The superior man seeks truth, that's his aim. He who knows all the answers ain't been asked enough. Life's like a puzzle, you gotta call his bluff. Yes, fact the madness, let the truth guide us. In the arena of debate, we'll all rise up. Question the madness, oh don't you see? In this crazy world, it's the only key to find the truth, the answers we seek. So let's all rise.